Let's go. Today, Tuesday, 20 February 2024. The time is 16:03, and I would like to call this meeting of the Cape Cod Gateway Airport Commission to order as we speak. May I have, oh wait, I gotta read. This meeting of the Cape Cod Gateway Commission, Airport Commission meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the Town of Barnstable's Government Access Channel. In accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30 Alpha, Section 20, the chair must inquire whether anyone else is recording this meeting, and if so, to please make their presence known. Nope. Okay, that's good. We have a roll call, please, Sue.
Certainly. Chairman Griffin,
Here.
Vice Chairman Flores,
Here.
Clerk Weil,
Here.
Commissioner Beerworth,
Here.
Commissioner Bailey,
Here.
Commissioner DeGeorge,
Here.
Commissioner Geo.
Here.
Thank you. And Yarmouth Rep. Christine Greeley is not present, but we do have a full quorum.
Okay, thank you very much, Sue. Do we have any guests that would like to introduce themselves quickly before we get going?
Would you like us to introduce ourselves now or after?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Joe Moderano. I am with Arup. We are an engineering consulting firm working with the Gateway Airport on its smart microgrid program. And
Thank
we
you.
have additional people from our organization, Gabrielle Burns and Eric, who is also on the call from our organization to help answer questions if we have any down the road.
Great, thank you very much. Any other guests out there? Okay, hearing none. We'll all just join me if you have to mute just to make less confusion.
Pledge of Allegiance, and everyone can mute themselves if they wish.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Griff, you're muted.
Yep. The modern technical stuff. Okay, we have minutes for the December 19th meeting and the January 16th meetings. Let's take them separately, please. Would somebody, I was not at the December meeting, so I'll have to abstain, but if somebody would make a motion to accept that one.
I'll
make a motion.
You take that one.
No, I've lost my screen, so I'm just gonna sit and listen for a minute.
I can see you.
Yeah, I can't see you though. I can't see anybody.
I move to accept the minutes of the December 19th meeting.
Second.
Any adjustments or otherwise corrections or additions, deletions? If not, all in favor signify aye. I must abstain.
Aye.
Okay. January 16th meeting. Would somebody? I have a correction for that one, but if somebody would read in a motion to accept with the file, I'll give you just some brief change in verbiage. I move we accept, subject to the changes I'm about to make.
Motion to accept the minutes for the meeting of January 16th, 2024, with some verbiage from our chairperson once he announces it.
Okay. So real simple, on the Yarmouth, at the very bottom of the Yarmouth representative comments, you have that handy? You there, Sue?
Yep, she's there.
Okay.
She's on mute.
The last line should read as follows. A pilot staying in the pattern would be over Glenwood Street on base leg before turning left onto final to land on runway 33 during flight training.
Oh,
And
so
I
you're
can-
muted.
Can you just repeat that one more time?
I can email it to you, Sue. I'll read
Okay.
it to everybody.
Thank you.
But I'll repeat it again, that the last line, a pilot staying in the pattern would be over Glenwood Street on base leg before turning left onto final to land on runway 33 during flight training.
Mr. Chairman, can I recommend that you do email that verbiage to Sue and that we table this until the next meeting for approval?
That's simple enough, Mark. And it doesn't change, it doesn't really change anything. It's just a technicality in the language, because that's what lines up with what I actually said.
I understand that, but now we haven't seen what the actual printed document looks like and whether it's captured correctly or not.
And yeah, we can do whatever. I'll email it to Sue and we can take it up in the next meeting if you want.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll table that. I'll get that info to Sue. Thank you. Public comment. Do we have public comment this month? Anybody in the public who would like to address the commission is welcome to do so. If you tell us who you are, where you're from, and give us 2 minutes of your best commentary. Hearing none, we'll move on. Since we don't need hearing none, there will be no response. We have report from the subcommittees, the Finance Subcommittee, Commissioner Weil. Norm, you got?
Okay. The Finance, Cape Cod Gateway Airport Finance Subcommittee met on Tuesday, February 6th at 8:32 a.m. via Zoom. Commissioners Weil and Bailey were present. Commissioner Flores was not able to attend. The minutes of the January 9th, 2024 regular session was not addressed at this meeting and will be on the March 5th meeting. As far as old business, there was not anything that we covered or added to new old business. In new business, there are a number of things I'm going to go through relatively quickly. As my normal prelude, these are all things that will be talked about at this meeting today. And basically, unless I say otherwise, we were recommending that the item after review was voted on and agreed to be moved to the full session today. The first one was FIN 0224-1, review and approve the license agreement by and between Cape Cod Gateway Airport and American Airlines. Again, that will be discussed in detail today. We discussed FIN 022-4, review and approve lease agreement by and between Cape Cod Gateway Airport and Atlantic Aviation. Again, we will be discussing that. That was moved to this committee for full consideration. FIN 0224-3, review and approve lease amendment by and between Cape Cod Gateway Airport and INS Air Service, Inc., doing business as Cape Air and Nantucket Air. Again, we reviewed that lease amendment and will be discussed further in this meeting. FIN 0224-4, review and approve memorandum agreement between the town of Barnstable and the Cape Cod Airport Commission. And I believe it was with the Horace Witten Group. That will be discussed in this meeting. Review and approve past grant assurances between Cape Cod Gateway Airport Commission and MassDOT Aeronautics Division. I know Katie will go into this, basically complying with some dotting the i's and crossing the t's, making sure that everything was handled properly in the record keeping. FIN 0224-6, amendment number 8 to the contract dated August 18th, 2020, by and between Cape Cod Gateway Airport and Horace Witten Group for on-call environmental engineering, permitting, and DEP remediation consulting services. I also noticed they were in the Cape Cod Times, having received a big contract from another organization. We went over the basic updates, all of which will be discussed at this meeting. The meeting was adjourned at 9:41 a.m.
Thank you very much, Norm. Any questions, comments regarding the Finance Subcommittee meeting? Hearing none, we'll move to the Infrastructure and Marketing Subcommittee meeting. Commissioner DeGeorge.
Okay, the Infrastructure Marketing Subcommittee met on Tuesday, February 13th at 10:34 a.m. Commissioner DeGeorge, Bearworth, and Gio were present. The meeting was held via Zoom. We had no old business. On new business, we had IN 02241, an update on the Cape Air Fleet Building door replacement. Manager Service gave us a brief update on the status of the door replacement. At the time, the frame was installed in door 1, just waiting to skin, and door 2 hopefully would be completed in the next couple of weeks. An amendment to the existing lease or a new lease will be negotiated to follow the consideration of the cost of the facility improvements. The next one was IN 0224-2, update on the Beta Electric aircraft charging station installation. Airport Management has been working with Beta of Burlington, Vermont on the installation of a fast electric charging station on the east ramp between Aloft Aviation and the maintenance facility. There will be a conduit running outside the fence to install a level 2 charging station for vehicles. The airport requested a categorical exclusion from determination from the FAA on facility siting, construction, and maintenance. The results of the KTEX determination was that no further NEPA review was required and the project was categorically excluded. The process was paid for by Beta and not the airport. A lease for the property has been drafted and is in Beta's hands for review. The last item we had was IN 0224-3, overview and report on the 2023 marketing campaign with Cape Cod Broadcasting Media. Airport has been working with CCB for several years on seasonal marketing, the airline activity and destination, as well as our events. Last year was the first time the airport provided more digital marketing using mobile conquesting and behavioral targeting. Michelle Wazenda's marketing consultant for CCB presented a proposal on the new campaign. The 2024 campaign will incorporate a wider digital net of local conquesting behavioral targeting being expanded to New York and DC for a short period of time during the May to September months. Radio will resume for airline and event advertisement. The commission is requested to review the Google Analytics and specific user information at the next meeting on how best to show the results for the 2023 campaign will be reviewed. After that, Katie gave us a couple of updates. And as far as upcoming events were reviewed, and then Commissioner Gio requested that an in-person workshop be scheduled for the Strategic Plan Ad Hoc Committee with Pierce Cote. At that point, we had no other business to discuss, and the meeting was adjourned at 11:39 a.m.
Thank you very much, Joe. Any comments or corrections or anything? No, not corrections, no, but any questions or comments regarding that?
No.
Brad?
No.
Oh,
All
you
set.
lighted up. Okay. Yeah, let's work on getting that strategic planning subcommittee going. That would be great. Okay. Moving on to old business, there is none. New business. I'll start with COMM 0224-1 update on the smart microgrid planning process. Go ahead, Katie and company.
Sure, no problem. So as you know, the airport was the only airport in the nation to receive a grant to investigate and plan for the installation of a smart microgrid system. The planning project was awarded to Arup and their team. They will present an update to the commission on various aspects of the study. You just met a few moments ago, Joseph, Gabrielle, and Eric from the Arup team. I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint presentation. I'll give a quick overview and then hand that over to Joseph for him to provide any further detail. So give me a few moments. Let me know when you see the screen.
We see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, you have the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. I do not have the presentation. Give me a second.
We had a piece of a sectional map.
All right. So give me 2 seconds. Let's try this again. Okay. You see that?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
So this is just a commissioner update, kind of walk through, and that changed for you, correct? It went to the meeting agenda.
Mhm.
All right.
Yes.
So obviously Joseph will introduce his team again. We'll give a quick overview of the project, the background, define what is a smart microgrid, project scope and goals that we have for the project, the outcomes that we anticipate from the project, stakeholder engagement and how we're going to go about doing that, community concerns, and project proposed schedule. So obviously the ARP team was chosen as the project's prime consultant, with the project manager being Joseph and his team. Mastar Aeronautics is the project lead. So this is a contract that Mastar Aeronautics has between themselves and ARP to implement this project on the airport's behalf. The purpose of the project is really designed to be, designing a robust infrastructure to provide cutting edge model of clean energy at Cape Cod Gateway Airport. MassDOT had 4 key pillars that they wanted to focus on during the overall project development. One was setting the standard of resilient, clean energy in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that airports around the country can use as a model. Positioning Cape Cod Gateway Airport as the model for and how to drive a multimodal transportation decarbonization in the region. Incorporate opportunities that benefit the community of Cape Cod and the airport, and then deliver a forward-looking solution to leverage flexibility, flexible infrastructure, and cost-effective procurement approaches as we move forward with the project. I'm going to hand this over to Joe now. Joe, just tell me when you need me to advance, but I'd like Joe to provide an overview of how they intend to accomplish this task.
Thanks, Katie. Welcome. Thanks everybody for this time. I appreciate this I think our whole team appreciates this very much. A chance to talk with you. I am, as we started out, Joe Martirano. I am the energy discipline lead for the East here at Arup. Sorry, I oversee or what we call urban energy also. Urban energy is basically anything that's pretty much on the customer side of the meter is kind of how we look at it. Microgrids, district energy systems, PV, all those kinds of things that fit on the customer side of the meter. So we kind of handle that. And on the call with us today are 2 members of our team. We have a rather large team, but 2 of the members were able to join us today, Gabrielle and Eric. who are intimately involved with this project, have been helping to do some of the interviews and put some of the gather some of the data. Just so I'm not sure everybody's familiar with who Arup is. Arup is a rather large engineering firm. We have roughly, I guess, across the country, across the world, about 18,000 employees, about 2,000 in the US. We work in all different disciplines, whether it's mechanical, electrical, structural, civil, a lot of different disciplines in engineering, including energy, and energy being one of our growth disciplines that actually be working forward. This team that's working with you is out of both the Boston and New York office. It's kind of a mix of people from both offices. And we've been putting together this project with the help of Katie and Owen over at MassDOT and helping put this whole thing together. Kind of move on, Katie. Thank you. As just a general overview, our energy group does a lot. I mean, a lot of different things. We look at everything from energy storage, renewable energy. We have a hydrogen group. We have a group that specializes in interconnects. Like I said, the utility system. We're talking right now about the urban and the basically the system that's kind of associated with district energies and things of that nature. And we have a very holistic approach to this. We take that approach very strongly, that we as a company are really dedicated to the idea of sustainability and renewable energy. That is something that's become a very big part of our organization. Arup is a little bit unique in the fact that we are an employee-owned organization. There's actually a trust that was set up for the employees when the original founder of the company passed. And in doing that, the way the company is structured is we basically can choose the projects that we want to work on more than anything else, quite frankly, because we don't have to turn a profit to shareholders or anything of that nature. So it gives us some extra leeway in what we can do. And several years ago, the employees made the decision that we would really only work on projects that we felt bettered the built community and bettered the decarbonization or the sustainability of the environment. And that has been a major pillar of our company, and we have transitioned very strongly into this as being our focus. And the lead of this whole organization now is driven towards only projects that help in some way make things better, quite frankly. Keep going. Just as a general background, there was a grant that was made available, and MassDOT was able to get themselves approved for the grant. There were roughly 59 grants awarded and 392 different applications were sent in. Cape Cod Gateway Airport was the only one to receive a grant for a smart microgrid, which is a really nice thing. The grant sum is somewhere in the neighborhood of well, the average was about 1.5. Your grant initially is about 1.8, $1.9 million to do preliminary work. The goal of it is actually to get to a certain point and then apply for a second grant to help fund and actually implement what comes out of this study. Just an idea, these are some of the locations that other grants were awarded, and you can get a feel for what was out there. They're all over the place. You guys did pretty well in being able to get one of these grants. A lot of credit to your team that wrote the grant and to bringing this forward for you. Like I said, it's a great opportunity for the airport to set the standard for a lot of the other airports around here. Move that out of the way because I think that's probably making noise from my phone. As you can see, some of these other grants that were out there were given for all different types of things, from just standard transportation, looking at smart transportation, smart signaling, uncrewed aircraft, UAVs, basically all different things, smart grids. You guys, there were 4 awarded total, and basically you were one of those to be able to get it. And you were the only one actually in the airport or the aviation industry to actually get one, which was very nice. So what is a smart microgrid? Basically, a microgrid, for people to understand, really is a way to operate the airport independent of the major grid of the utility service. That's really the best way to think about it. There will be times when the airport may, for whatever reason, lose power from Eversource. It may find itself isolated for longer term periods than they thought. Sandy was a great lesson in this for most of the East and for the Northeast. what can happen and how bad that can be. As being an originally a Jerseyite, I kind of have a feeling for how bad Sandy can be sometimes. So so basically the idea of a microgrid is to create a way for you to actually operate the airport sustainably and for some time period, potentially indefinitely, without the need for an electric utility in a cost-effective way and one that provides safety and other things. Typically, microgrids include some form of generation resource, some kind of interconnect to the utility, so it allows for the easy moving back and forth between the two. We look at it sometimes as including anything from fuel cells to solar photovoltaics to battery storage to cogeneration, whatever makes the most sense is how we kind of look at it. And then we as a company take the approach, and we try to make our analysis done on the idea of two things, or two real key issues. One is we look at it from what I like to call the 3 R's: reliability, renewable, and resilient power. That's the key to making the smart grid work well. And the second one is basically to really create something that, for lack of a better term, is future-proof, that as it gets built out, is something that as the market changes, new technologies come on board, you're not behind the 8 ball because you went down one path and all these other paths actually now turn out to be the right one. We try to lay it out so it's flexible enough so it actually can move and change as the market moves. I was going to share right here, if I can steal the screen, some of our other microgrids that we worked on to give you an idea of the kind of projects. Do you mind if I put those up on the screen?
Yeah, let me just give you co-host rights. You should be all set, Joe.
Okay. He's up here. Okay, and that should be right here. Okay, tell me if you can.
Just
We
as
can see it.
Just curious, is there a time limit on this presentation, or is it open-ended?
I think we probably want to wrap it up and in a little bit and ask questions. So,
Yeah,
Joe, I'm not sure how much time you're going to spend on this section.
I'm only going to I'll throw a couple of slides up real fast just to give an idea of some of the grids, and then we'll move on. In your reason, we're working right now with the Vineyard Transit Authority. We're also working on some other microgrids in other cities and other towns. I just wanted to get to a couple of airports. We've worked with Montreal Airport. We've worked with John Wayne Airport. We're working with a bunch of airports and some rather large and familiar names on their microgrids to help them figure out how to make them self-sustainable and operate in the same fashion. This is this is an example of a flow battery we're putting in, which is actually a new technology, a demonstration technology. That's really as far as I'm going to go on this. I won't go through a lot of them. I really just wanted to get you the example of a couple of the airports to show that we've done airports before, so we have a general idea of what would be some of the pathways that we would want to go down.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks very much, Joe.
I think we just have probably about 5 more slides just to run through and then ask some questions of the commission.
Yeah, I'll be quick on these. Really, the smart grid project, the idea of it is that we're doing this in multiple phases. The first phase is pretty much a preliminary look-see to define as a company, we like to talk about pathways. There's multiple different pathways you can go down, a lot of different technologies out there. Let's kind of narrow those down to the ones that make the most sense before we spend a lot of time and energy doing the detailed design on any one of those. So what we'll do in this first phase that we're doing right now is we're narrowing down our technologies to a handful that make some sense. Once we get those pathways defined, then in phase 2, we'll do an environmental study and also do a study of how the pathway, which the cost and the benefits of each pathway individually will be. And then we'll turn that over into phase 3 and actually start doing heavy design work. And by the end of this, for the second grant application, we'll get to a 30 to 50% design. Like I said, develop reliable sources of power. We're looking at everything from solar to wind to geothermal. The idea is that it has to balance out and be a benefit to everyone there. We're doing a very extensive job of trying to make sure this works to reach your future load. I heard you mention the EV charging that you were putting in, things like that, new load that's coming on, changes to the airport, changes the whole industry, whether it's eVTOL aircraft or whatever it might be that might be coming along. We need to make sure it ties all that together and we can actually make this all work and do it in a reliable, safe way.
Perfect.
project outcomes expected. At the end of the day, financially, we were trying to look at financials, resiliency, and sustainability. Those are the three major areas where we are looking at this to kind of evaluate each one of the three pathways we're putting together, or multiple pathways we're putting together. We can talk about this more when we get the discussion. I wanted to actually open up here, but we can talk about this later on. But what's important to the commission as we go through and look at these? I want to understand your guys' feel also for what's important as we go through this. We've been doing a lot of stakeholder engagement. I think that'll be the next slide, actually, and give you an idea. As we go through and do stakeholder engagements, we're holding interviews and conversations with the airlines, with the car rental companies, with the tenants of the airport, with the transit authority, with the airport administration, Eversource, even the solar developer you have on site right now. We're trying to get a feel for everybody, make sure everybody's aware of what's going on. They have their chance to speak and they're heard as part of this process. I think that's really important from a stakeholder engagement, that we get them involved. If we don't do that, there's always going to be a lot of naysayers, but as long as we keep them informed and keep them in the loop, we hope to keep that down to a minimum and actually get them on board and solve their problems along the way. Right now, we are looking at and reviewing combinations of all these technologies. These are the technologies we've identified as being the most likely to make some sense. Which ones play out at the end of the day? We're in that phase right now. We've kind of narrowed this down in our heads, but we're actually now writing up the reports to say what actually makes the most sense. Does it make sense to go with solar or battery storage? Does it make sense to put a generator on site? There's an existing solar field there. Can we take better use of that? Does hydrogen fuel, because down the road, hydrogen might be the fuel for flight? Does that make sense? Can we tie into the offshore wind, quite frankly, that's coming in? Is that even an option? Because Eversource has tie lines that will be tying into that, and you're tied to the same lines. As electric vehicles are parked in the parking lot, can they become part of your storage system and vehicle to grid, where people's batteries in their cars become part of your storage system? We're looking to tie all those together. And as we do that, we're going to make sure that all this stuff, we look at it from the technology standpoint and all the hurdles that we're hearing, or we need to review, everybody, the not in my backyard idea of it, the interconnect Eversource is going to be an issue going forward. Do you have enough power? Is there enough room in the lines? Siting issues as far as panels or other things we might put there, the FAA may have concerns about, environmental impact, the cost, the visual appearance of the airport, and obviously community concerns over wind in general.
Okay.
That's our schedule and our timeline for how things went. We're just getting close to the end of phase 1 and moving into phase 2. And that's basically,
yeah. So I thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. We didn't know if the commission at this point in time had any questions. We wanted you to know where we were on the process. We're at phase 1. We'll be moving into phase 2. Any questions for Joe and his team?
I have a question and a comment.
Oh, sure.
Norm and then Mark.
Can we go through the chair?
My question is, who wrote the grant for us?
So the grant was written by MassDOT Aeronautics. They have a grant writer for the team.
Okay.
They chose Cape Cod Gateway Airport as their airport for this program, and they chose the Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority as well. So they reached out to a number of different airports. They looked at each airport in terms of what they had in place already for infrastructure that was using green technology, such as our 20-acre array, and then they honed into which airport would be most applicable to their grant study.
And my comment is, this is to me a reflection on management and the staff, sort of the hidden talent that exists in our organization for an airport our size. I think about the FAA looking to us as a potential screening site for in support of, I should say, TSA as a screening site because of our capabilities and performance. Again, here, this is a reflection on the airport and management and the people who work here. So I'd like that acknowledged.
Thank you, Norm. Commissioner Gio, you're.
Yeah, I just, forgive me if I missed it. I understand where all the different components are, but what I'm not clear about is what exactly is a smart grid? Is it a self-contained source of energy for a specific location? Is it something that supplements energy, or is it something that's used simply as a backup in the event that the main source of energy fails?
Yeah, the way we look at it, the smart grid, basically it's all of those, but in your case, the way we're looking at it for you is that it has two main purposes. A smart grid is typically a self-contained generation on your site or somehow associated with your site or dedicated to your site is the best way to put it. Dedicated to your site, doesn't have to be at your physical location, dedicated to your site, that during those times when the grid is unavailable, allows you to island or run entirely separate from the grid if you need to or if you want to. So both can happen. So some grids, smart grids, allow you during times of what Eversource might declare as a congestion period where it's more cost benefit for you to run as your own little separate entity. That may be the option you go down, the path you go down, because that's actually something that Eversource and you decide to do contractually. Or if Eversource loses their system and they're down because they've just got an interruption for an hour or two, the smart grid will pick up and carry the load. And in the worst case scenario, if a hurricane hits and the airport loses its feed for 2 weeks, or a line is down permanently, or there's a transmission issue of some kind, the airport will continue to operate, it can continue to operate and serve the community in an emergency fashion at full capacity, as if nothing ever happened to it. The other piece of that is really important, that the transition from the utility to the smart grid is instantaneous. There will be no blip.
So my follow-up question then would be, why wouldn't we just operate our smart grid and cut off Eversource altogether? Why wouldn't we become self-sufficient?
Why wouldn't you become just self-sufficient?
Right,
sorry.
using the smart grid. If the smart grid is fully developed and capable of sustaining operations at this airport without any outside source of energy, why wouldn't we just use it and nothing else?
And that's an option that you have. It's a viable option. The benefit of keeping your tie to Eversource and keeping your tie to the utility is that while the smart grid can serve as the backbone for you, there's always that need, we feel, at most locations like this, like an airport, for that second service or point where somewhere else you have a second source of power. So it's that belts and suspenders idea. If something happens and you lose your grid for some reason, or Eversource loses theirs, there's always a second source. So it's always good to have both. And then there's reasons from economics that sometimes, depending on the price of electricity on the New England power pool, may actually be better than the price you can make it. And you may choose to buy from them because you have a better price, or you may choose to make it when it's actually cheaper for you to make it than buy from them. And that's why we like to keep it that way. You can actually, it's an option that's controlled. That's why the smart part, it's smart because it knows when to choose which one to do. Do I buy from Eversource or do I make my own? It kind of keeps that in line.
Thank you. Any other, John, Commissioner,
Yeah.
Vice Chair for John Flores?
Yeah, I have 2 or 3 questions. First of all, Arup as a company, is Arup a name or an acronym?
Arup is a name. Our founder was Ove Arup, was his name. And he was a, I guess, British engineer back in the 1950s. Started the company, his first, the thing that actually got Arup on the map is we did the Opera House in Sydney. That was our first major project that we actually used as our flagship project all the time. That was our first major project. And since then, Ove Arup, as he developed the company, it grew into a very large company, one of the largest in the world, quite frankly, engineering companies. We are a couple $2 billion a year in engineering work. And like I said, he passed, I actually don't know when. I should know this. Actually, I did read his biography. It's required reading, actually, when you start. I don't remember. But when he passed, he made the company into a trust for its employees, and it has continued on in his name and in his philosophy and his work ethic as far as bringing value to its clientele.
Okay, thank you. You've answered a couple of questions already that I had. I'm just curious, if we lose power now, what do we do? What do we depend on?
Yeah, right now you have a couple backup generators for different pieces of equipment, like the tower and
Okay.
some way lighting and things like that, but you can't keep the whole airport up. You can keep certain portions of it, but not the whole place. And this would actually allow you to keep the whole place up and running.
Okay. And finally, I have a couple of friends that own companies that basically buy energy from Eversource and they put it into storage facilities.
Yep.
And they buy it in off hours at a cheaper price. And then when Eversource needs it, they sell it back for a higher price. That's how they make their profit.
Yep.
Would we have the same capability to do that?
Yeah. The funny thing is, and it gets into a question again, how you want to use your grid. But one of the things we are looking at is storage on your facility because we think storage makes a whole lot of sense for you. If we were to put in depending on how much storage we put in, that would be an option that you would have. Our original thought on the storage would be that the first primary use of it would be to serve as that backup, as that capacity backup, you're basically your call option in case you lose the grid. And if we hit, let's say we went with the solar, and the solar wasn't generating, you'd have the backup, you'd have the batteries there to supply the airport. But if you find financially that it's more valuable to do the other option, that is definitely a capable option you can do. There would be no reason not to be able to do that. The batteries don't know the difference, quite frankly. They could easily sell.
Right. The reason I ask, I mean, they've only been in business 3 or 4 years. They've got some federal grants, and they're making seven-figure profit.
Oh yeah,
and that would be an opportunity for us to create a new revenue source. That's what I'm thinking.
The arbitrage between the day and the night prices on the grid itself, on the main grid,
It's huge.
backbone grid is actually very substantial.
It is.
Not to digress for a second, but there are periods when the price for electricity actually goes negative because there's nowhere to store. Yeah, so
exactly
there's benefit to doing that.
Yeah, no, the kilowatt hour per the cents per kilowatt is way down during off hours.
Yeah.
Anyway, that answers my questions. Thank you.
Okay, I thank everybody. Anybody else real quick? I got one. This is a short question, short answer. Just on the horribly unfortunate event of, say, an extreme emergency, would we have the capability with this system fully functioning to provide emergency power to outside source like like the hospital or anything like that? Does this, if they lost everything, could we provide emergency power or something into the grid? Is that foolish?
No, it's not foolish, but given the regulatory environment right now, that would require you to send power across Eversource's lines. And that's not something that we could do unless you were actually to become a true, basically a third-party generating company.
Thank you. That answers that. Thanks very much. Any other? All right, Joe, thank you very much for that presentation. This is really interesting stuff.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
And,
Thank you very much.
I just
Joe
have one
and
other
team.
question.
Go ahead, John.
One other quick one. Joe, you said you had 18,000 people in your company?
We do, well, roughly.
And you're an employee-owned company, and you said you make your own decisions. How do you get anything determined?
Good question. It's a really good question. I wonder that some days myself.
I'm just curious. Okay.
The way it works is actually we do have a hierarchy. We work our way up through levels of the company, and we do have a governing board. But the board is made up of employees of the company, and we do a lot of surveys and voting across the entire company as to directions and strategies and things of that nature. But we do have an overall management team who does actually run the company. We do have a CEO and a COO who do oversee the operations.
You should do a case study. I'd like to read it.
Yeah.
There is one actually. I could probably get that for you.
Could you send it to me? I'd be interested in it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you guys. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you.
This is a great
Well,
project.
thanks very much for being here and for all that information.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you
Moving
very
on.
much.
We're gonna drop off if that's okay.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Yeah,
Thank
go
you,
right
Joe.
ahead. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. All right, see you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we are going into COMO 224-2. Commissioner Weil, would you read that motion into the record, please?
Yes. This is COM 0224-2, and it's a motion to approve the commercial aeronautical activity permit bind between Cape Cod Gateway Airport and Blue Hill Helicopters. The sponsor is the Finance Subcommittee, and it may be acted upon at this meeting.
I have a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Brad. Discussion, Katie?
Sure. So as you know, the airport users are varied. We have everything from year-round residents, employees transitioning to the islands, contractors that go to the islands as well, hospitality workers that we're transitioning to different locations. So our users are very varied. So to continue to provide various activity at the airport, we have been approached by Blue Hill Helicopters, and I have with me tonight Bravin Mahendran. Did I say that correct? Mahendran?
Yes. Almost
Um,
correct, Katie. It's Praveen Mahendran.
Thank you. He is here with us tonight. He will be a sublessor to Atlantic Aviation and is interested in operating a helicopter tour operation, as well as potential Part 135 operations in the future at the airport. So thus far, the documentation that we've asked him to Blue Hill Helicopters to get included an aeronautical activity permit, which is subject to this evening's agenda item. He has received his business license from the town of Barnstable on the 16th of this month. He received a letter of authorization from the FAA under FAR Part 91 rules as a commercial air tour operator, and he has insurance coverage for his operation, and he has named the airport as additionally insured. They will be operating Blue Hill Helicopters year-round on a year-round basis from Hyannis, and anticipate, like I said, a future 135 operation, which he's now in the process of seeking that authority. Helicopter operations are not new to the airport. This calendar year, we've had over 850 helicopter operations, and that included medical evacuation flights, military flights, corporate flights such as CVS, Raytheon, Charles Schwab, and obviously some of the tour operators that are already here on the airport. So in the past, we have received some comments from the public in regards to the type of operation and what would be provided by Blue Hills. I'll go over that with you momentarily. Just wanted to make sure that we had Blue Hill Helicopters here tonight to answer any questions that you may have. So obviously from past aeronautical activity permits that we've approved, we need to make sure that we are in correspondence with the Federal Aviation Administration, in that we ensure that we're meeting our requirements from an airport to provide such activity at the airfield. Obviously, we're following our grant assurances, grant assurance number 22 and 23, which basically grant assurance number 2 is economic non-discrimination. In other words, we have to make our airport available to anybody in the public that wants to provide an aeronautical activity here at the airport. And then grant assurance number 23, the airport cannot have an exclusive right for any one entity over another. So we basically open up our public facility for any type of activity that wants to occur here at the airport. So in speaking to Blue Hill Helicopters, one of the things that we looked at was how long each tour will last. So it's about under an hour is, from our understanding, most likely a 30-minute flight is what Blue Hill is presenting. Operations per day will depend on their customers and their clientele. The existing operators that we have here on the airfield, on average, conduct anywhere from 50 to 60 flights per year. Again, it will depend on what the clientele is for Blue Hill Helicopter. They're looking at year-round flights on the higher end for tour activity, about $300 per tour is the proposed. We are looking at procedures for our Fly Friendly, Fly Quiet program that I've indicated to Blue Hill that I'd like them to be part of that process. We do not necessarily have helicopter tour routes developed right now in our flight procedures, but we are working on a scope of work with our folks at Airport Solutions Group to develop, or at least look at, our voluntary noise procedures, and if possible, come up with any additional or modifications to our existing to include helicopter tour operators. About 25 nautical miles is the limit for these tours, based on the certificate and the authorization that Blue Hill gets from the FAA. And the altitudes will be anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 feet for those tours. They're going to operate very similarly to the other operators, which is they would depart the airport, in this case from Atlantic Aviation, and either fly north along the shoreline towards the bridges, or fly south again along the shoreline going over to Woods Hole. The proposed helicopters for use are an R-44, Robertson 44, and a Bell 206. That's all I have for my overview. Please feel free to ask any questions while we have Blue Hill here and present.
Commissioner Gio?
Yes, are we being asked at this meeting to approve this lease?
To approve the activity permit.
Oh,
The
the activity
commercial-
permit, not the lease.
Correct. We don't have a lease with them. They have a lease in place as a subtenant to Atlantic Aviation. So we're only being asked to approve the activity permit.
Okay,
Commissioner-
all right, I understand, thank you.
Commissioner Flores, Vice Chair Flores?
Katie, at a meeting a few months ago, we had that group come in from Hyannis Park relative to the same issue. The same types of questions and issues and concerns that they raised, I assume that you've raised those with Braveen to be sure that in terms of altitude and quiet and things of that nature, noise levels have all been covered.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Weil?
At that meeting, I don't think we did an adequate job of explaining, you know, what can happen within 5 miles of our airport and who is responsible for that activity. But between the ground and 2,500 feet in general in a 5-mile radius, that any activity that's going on is controlled by the FAA and the control tower. And there is a lot of sensitivity as to what's going on at that particular, in that particular airspace. And they want to keep it pretty clean for inbound and outbound traffic. So I think it's important that people understand that it's a very controlled environment in the 5 miles around at low altitude around the airport.
All true. Thanks, Norm. Wendy? You're muted.
Praveen, is Blue Hills a new organization, and what kind of experience do you have in this type of operation, and who will be performing the maintenance on the helicopters?
Wendy, great questions. It's not a new company. We've been operating for 2 decades out of Norwood Airport, and we've been doing sightseeing tours around Boston. We have in-house maintenance, and sometimes if it's any major maintenance, we ferry the helicopters to bigger facilities like JBI Helicopters, Port City up in Portsmouth, or anybody who is really available for that particular job. And in terms of experience level, I'm a commercial pilot, active pilot myself. I fly down in New York City, so I'm very aware of all the noise abatements and regulations, and that's why we'd love to be part of creating these routes together with Katie and make sure that we don't receive any particular noise complaints, helicopters specifically. Just to give you an idea, we have not received any noise complaints last year flying over Boston, and we've done hundreds of flights.
Great. And for your 135 operation that you anticipate, what type, I'm assuming fixed wing, what type aircraft, and are these aircraft that you're operating already?
It is not fixed wing, it is solely helicopters. We have 3 types of helicopters, and we will see which one we need to add to the certificate. It's something that we're starting the process with the FAA on now. So hopefully we'll complete it by the end of the year, but it's really in the FAA's hands of how fast they can work with us to finish the approval.
Provine, we heard of two types of helicopters, the R-44 and the Bell 206. What's the third one?
That's a Bell 407, but it's not something, we currently have, but it's in the works.
Aha, thank you. Okay, any other questions, comments? We are asked to approve the activity permit. And I will move the question. All in favor, signify, raise your hand and say aye, please. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, it's unanimous. Welcome aboard, Braveen. We'll hope this all works and successful. Yes, Commissioner Flores.
One quick question. What is the amount of the liability insurance that you mentioned, Katie? They have to take out?
Yeah. So
You
let me
said they
just-
have insurance. What does that
Right.
mean?
let me just
Braveen,
pull it up.
you're muted.
Yeah, let me find that information for you here, John.
I can
We
pull
have
it up
both,
right
obviously,
here.
we have both hull insurance and liability insurance.
John,
Okay.
I'm pulling it up right now. This is the insurance that we have right now. And it goes over the insured value for the aircraft, as well as the passenger liability.
No, I'm talking about their insurance.
That is our insurance.
That's your insurance? Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
We just have the airport as additional insured.
okay. Is that $1 million? Okay. Wait a minute, each passenger is only $100,000?
That's correct. That's the standard.
Pretty low,
It is the standard, is what we have for a lot of our airlines too, John.
really?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's low. I'm not in the
Okay,
insurance business, so it's just
yeah.
low.
Any other questions for Braveen?
I'm good.
Okay, thank you for joining us, Braveen. And I'm
Thank you,
sure
Braveen.
I'm sure we'll see you around in the coming months and years.
Yes, thank you very much for allowing us, and we're looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, moving on. Katie, am I correct that the next two motions are to be tabled?
Yes, that's correct. It's the lease approval for American Airlines and the lease for Atlantic Aviation. American Airlines has their attorneys still reviewing the agreement. For Atlantic Aviation, our attorneys will still need to take a look at the maintenance program that we have, a draft for them. So they'll be on hold for 1 month.
Okay, do we need to read those in to table them, or can we just say they're tabled?
Well, Mr. Chairman, there's been no motion, so
You can just move on.
Okay, thank you much for the procedural guidance. Vice Chairman Flores, would you read 0224-5, please?
All right, this is approval of the lease amendment number 1 by and between Cape Cod Gateway Airport and Hyannis Air Services, Inc., doing business as Cape Air and Nantucket Air. Motion is to approve the lease amendment number 1 by and between Cape Cod Gateway Airport and Hyannis Air Service, Inc., doing business as Cape Air and Nantucket Air, effective March 1st, 2024, to reduce the lease space in the terminal from 1,440 square feet to 1,168 square feet. The sponsor is the Finance Committee, and this may be acted upon.
Have a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Katie?
Sure. With the advent of American Airlines' arrival in June of 2024, the airport has asked Cape Air to make modifications to their leased terminal space to allow for ease of baggage belt access for American Airlines. So we're very grateful to Cape Air for doing this. We also do have an item in their lease, as well as the other tenants' leases, that identifies if we do need to change space, that we can also do so with the tenant at hand. Cape Air will be relocating one of their offices next week. moving their sign, and they have already dismantled and moved one of their counters that they had in front of the location where American Airlines will be. They will have most of their equipment moved out and wrapped up by the end of this month, which will give American Airlines the opportunity to start moving their equipment into those spaces. Cape Air has reduced their lease space from 1,440 square feet to 1,168 square feet. It's basically the counter that has really changed. The office space that they moved from is about the same square footage. It's really the reduction is really in the counter space that they've offered. So this will be their new space that they're renting from the airport. This is their current location that they are right now with their current counter. This is where their new counter will be, and they are moving their office over to a different back office. We just are in the process of hopefully this Thursday installing some carpet in that area for them. Any questions or comments?
Question.
John, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I'm just curious. So they're gonna be leasing 272 less square feet. The loss of that lease revenue, I assume, gets picked up by American Airlines
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. at the same level?
No, American Airlines, their total square footage for rent is 513 square feet. So they're taking some of the counter space, but they're also utilizing all 3 offices behind their counter. So that actually will help as well.
Are they paying the same level, same
So
cost?
they start in the first year, they have an incentive program, which in the first 6 months gives them a 50% discount for the space. In the latter 6 months, it gives them a 25% discount. And then in year 2 of their lease, they pay fair market value.
So just, I think what John is trying to get to is, what's the impact to the revenue? Are we making the same? Are we losing money? Are we gaining money?
We're making a little bit more even with
Okay.
the incentives that we have in place.
Because of this additional space they're renting.
That is correct.
Any other questions, comments? All right, call the question. Everybody in favor signify, raise your hand and say aye.
I,
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, thank you very much. That's unanimous. Commissioner Brad Bailey, Commissioner, sir, would you be kind enough to read in -6?
COM 0224-6, motion to approve memorandum of agreement between the town of Barnstable and the Cape Cod Gateway Airport Commission for a one-time transfer of funds from the Airport Enterprise Fund to the Water Supply Enterprise Fund of $477,887, which represents the Airport Commission's allocable share of the costs to address PFAS contamination in the affected water system. Sponsors the Finance Subcommittee, may be acted upon.
May I have a second, please?
second,
Thank you, Norm. Katie?
Sure.
This
We have been working, as you know, with Horsley Witten Group. They've completed a detailed review of analytical data performing groundwater fate and transport studies, and has utilized forensic science techniques to identify the extent of the airport's impact of using firefighting foam that has PFAS in it on the airfield, and what that impact is downgrading of the airport. So our historic use of PFAS foam that has PFAS in it required that the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, or the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, the Bureau of Waste the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup, to reach out to the airport, as you know, back in 2015, and to identify how the airport would go about cleaning up firefighting foam that has been used over several decades here at the airport. The law that was implemented required that the airport look at their use of PFAS, use of firefighting foam, and thus PFAS within the foam, identify the areas on the airfield in which soil or groundwater was contaminated, and then come out with a plan for mitigation, and then final mitigation and monitoring of the mitigation sites through the next couple of years. So the airport has followed the MCP process, the Mass Contingency Plan process. We started in 2015 responding. We're now at the phase 5 process, which is the implementation of the approved remedy for the monitoring of the plume for the airport, and monitoring our mitigation sites and ensuring that the mitigation sites are working in the manner in which we had hoped or have hoped. So the majority of the PFAS impacted soil was in, if you remember, 2 locations on the airfield. I'll show you a graphic here. Let me just bring that up. 2 locations on the airport. This is at the ARF building, or the maintenance building, where our firefighting trucks are located, and then where we conducted annual annual testing, as well as every 3 years an exercise that we did to meet FAA criteria. We would spray foam in that area, as well as a exercise to ensure that the use of our firefighting equipment and the foam was being deployed in the manner in which it was supposed to. So through forensic science, we were able to identify where our mitigation needed to occur. So we have capped these 2 locations. This location here on the left-hand side next to the maintenance facility is capped with an asphalt cap, and it has monitoring wells that are located surrounding it. This site was capped with a polyfiber fabric cap, and again, it has monitoring wells located around it. Through evidence of modeling, we were able to identify how those plumes would be moving. Eventually, the plumes themselves, as the rainwater has stopped because of the caps, no longer is rainwater getting into that soil, so no longer is it washing PFAS into the groundwater. So eventually it will detach itself from our site. But we do know that it takes a while for the PFAS that's within the groundwater to move further downgrading of the airport. And this graphic that you're seeing there is showing, through modeling that has been accepted by Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, where our plume is moving. Our plume is moving towards the Maher wells. Our plume actually only impacts 1 of the 3 Maher wells based on our modeling that we show. The other 2 the other 2 wells are not impacted by the airport, but they are impacted by other industrial sites located north of the airport, as well as the Barnstable Fire Training Academy. Because of the impact that we see here with the Maher wells, the Maher treatment plant was designed to be able to combat PFAS so that drinking water was safe for the residents of Barnstable. When they developed their treatment facility, they looked at 3 different areas that they were going to treat. One was 1,4-dioxane, 2 was PFAS, and the other was other selected materials. So the treatment plant itself, because they had to implement new treatment, it was about a $10 million construction project to protect drinking water. And the Department of Public Works, the town of Barnstable, is seeking funding for this development because their plant has been impacted. So the airport is just one entity that they're seeking funding from. They will be looking for funding from other entities as well. The airport is responsible for a very small portion of the impact. About 33% or 34% is based on that forensic data. So basically, of the 3 wells and of the 3 types of treatments that were installed at the treatment facility, it's about 34% based on that forensic data. We anticipate, and this is a very conservative approach, but we anticipate that we will be impacting the Maher wells based on how long it takes for PFAS to move in groundwater for about 5 to 10 years. So we've identified about 10 years just to be very conservative. So we've considered all of these factors, and when we spoke to DPW and their impacts, we looked at a couple of different ways that we could implement payment towards the Maher well treatment facility. Let me just, don't get sick here, let me just move down to the 2 different ways that the airport is considering cost allocations to DPW. So the airport looked at payment for their initial construction. Just over $10 million was the cost of the plant. The percentage of wells that are impacted, so a third from that graphic that you just saw. The percentage of treatment required. So I told you that they identified 3 areas that they were treating for, 1,4-dioxane, other select metals, and PFAS. So we're accounting for only our PFAS, not select metals or 1,4-dioxane. And then what that percentage of total PFAS contribution is, which is 34%. That equates to $410,022 for the construction piece of it. Secondarily, the airport has agreed to make payments towards the carbon filtration that would be needed over a number of years. Annual carbon cost for the plant is $180,000. Again, if we take that percentage of the wells that were impacted, which is a third, we only impact 1, so that's 1/3. If we took a look at the treatment that is required, we're only required to identify 1/3 of that because we're only dealing with PFAS. So the total PFAS contribution that is on the airport is 34%. We're looking at a number of years. We've been conservative to look at 10 years. So the cost of that for the annual carbon cost for the plant is just over $67,000 for the airport. The total lump sum one-time payment coming from the airport reserves that we're presenting here tonight is $477,887. The airport and DPW have reached a consensus on this cost allocation. We've been working with them for over the past year to identify how we came up with these cost contributions. They based that analysis also on the data that we have to identify what the airport's impact was to the Mahar wells. The airport's attorney from Anderson and Krieger developed the MOU or the MOA that has been provided to the town's attorney. We've had subsequent meetings with the town's attorney as well as with DPW in regards to our overall cost allocation and why we feel that this is an appropriate share. We also have spoken to the FAA in regards to our cost allocation. We want to make sure that the FAA understands that we're not just giving of our reserves to a town entity. There's a reason for it. We don't want them to foresee this as revenue diversion, which is one of the reasons why we had this MOA developed. And it's one of the reasons why we had this cost allocation developed. So it more clearly defines what the airport is doing in terms of being responsive neighbors and responsible for the PFAS that has impacted nearby wells. Any questions or comments from the Airport Commission?
Wendy,
Katie, you said on that smaller capped area to the left, you said at one point it will detach itself. What does that mean? Where does it go?
Yeah, so what that means, Wendy, is we have no rainwater is no longer getting into the soils because those 2 areas have been capped. So we have an asphalt cap and a polyfiber cap, which essentially it stops the bleed, right? So no rainwater is not filtering through the soil. So whatever PFAS is in the soil today, prior to that cap, groundwater will move up and down. It will collect or flush out the soils, and eventually that PFAS will be drawn out of that area.
So where is it drawn to?
So because the Mahar wells are located south of the airport, they are drawing in anything that's coming in from the water table. Their pumping system brings that water into the Mahar wells. With the way our hydraulically, with the way that water is moving through this area and through those 2 capped areas, it is only affecting one of the 3 wells at Mahar.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
and since we're not adding any PFAS, any more foam at the moment, that means that the existing plume just moves on and kind of leaves us.
It moves on. It's pulled into the Mahar well system, which is why we are paying them for that treatment that they've implemented.
Okay, any other questions? Mark.
Katie, can you throw the math back up there again?
Sure.
So, no. Yeah. Scroll down a little bit more. to where the math is, not the map, but the math, where you're coming up with the dollars.
Oh, sorry. The math.
Yes, yes.
Let me get there. There
Stop
you
right
go.
there. Okay. So I'm looking at the formula in number 1, and I'm looking at the formula in number 2, and their formulas appear to be identical, with the exception of a parentheses of 10 in number 2. That's not present in number 1.
Right. So the number
Mhm.
1 cost allocation is just for the one-time fee associated with the Maha treatment plant construction. So that's that $10.8 million for them to actually construct it. So it's just that one-time construction. For number 2, it accounts for the annual carbon cost for the plant. So they have to go in, they have to change at some point in time, Mark, the carbon filtration system will be exhausted. They cannot collect any more PFAS, so they have to change those out on an annual basis. That cost estimate annually is about 180,000. And we anticipate that because of our plume and how long it's going to take our plume to move through the Mahar well system, that it will take about 10 years for that to occur, which means that they will be replacing carbon filters for the next 10 years that will be associated with collection of PFAS.
And that's the difference between the two formulas. Number 1 doesn't have a number of treatment years involved in the formula.
That is correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Weil.
This was discussed in great detail in the finance subcommittee. I have no argument with the calculation of the numbers. One of the points that I made is more around the public relations aspect of PFAS and the airport's involvement in the PFAS problem. It seems to me that the airport gets a lot more attention as the source of the PFAS problem than is, and we're only one of many contributors to it. And when it comes to getting payment for fixing of the problem, there's a lot of talk about the businesses north of the airport that have been there for many years, and many of them are small businesses that have been dumping pollutants into the ground, and none of them probably have the insurance or the money to be able to come up with that amount of money, and that's of overall that's of concern. But my biggest concern is that the reaction is always the airport seems to get the PR of being more responsible for the problem than it is.
And, that's, again, Norm, you didn't mention as one of the entities is the firefighting academy.
Yes.
John Flores?
Yeah, to that point, the firefighter training academy, which is up on the hill, right off of 6A, we have put the carbon filters were installed there probably about 4 years ago. And these are not typical carbon filters; they're atypical. These things are probably 10 feet wide and 20 feet high. I mean, they're huge. And the water filters through 3 of them, and then it basically feeds into the well. In that one, the firefighting academy well primarily affected the water supply in Hyannis. The Maha wells also impact the water supply in Hyannis, which was the critical issue. Because you have to remember, every village has its own water supply district, and they have their own well system. So it's not so these wells aren't impacting all of Barnstable; they're only impacting the village of Hyannis, just as the wells at the top of the fire training academy were only impacting Hyannis. That's why 5 years ago we had to give out bottled water to people in the village of Hyannis, because you have to remember, everything by water and fire is by village, not by town. The only town-wide department we have is DPW and the police. Fire and water are separate entities. So that's something to keep in mind. And Now makes a good point. There has been a dramatic increase in the level of funding from the Cape Cod Commission also, because remember, it wasn't the town that ran the fire academy, it was the Cape Cod Commission that ran it, because it was a Cape Cod training site. It wasn't a town of Barnstable training site. And so as a result, the Cape Cod Commission has had to come up with a substantial amount of the money in the actual treatment and the development of those treatment centers. But we're also blessed in the fact that Dan Santos, who was our director of the DPW, was also the guy who was responsible for the cleanup of Otis Air Force Base back in the day. So he really understands this process. And when I was on the council, it was very clear in terms of what we were doing. But with that being said, I'm just curious in terms of this $400,000 that we're taking out of our enterprise fund. What does that do to our account? What percentage is that, and what's left with that? Because that's not like monies that we've gotten from the government in the past. This is so-called our money, if you will. Not that the government money isn't our money, but this isn't one of those gifts.
Yeah, so unfortunately, this is not something that we can request grant funding through the FAA
Correct.
or for MassDOT Aeronautics. So we will be using the airport's reserve. In 2024, the capital improvement plan, we set aside 1.4 million to be able to, because we didn't know at the time how much we were going to be looking at for mitigation of the site. It will take $477,000 out of our current reserves. Our reserves were certified at 13 million in August of last year, just to give you a sense of what that looks like. If we were able to receive grant funding, of course, we would seek that, but right now the FAA and the state are not participating.
Is there any kind of federal like hazmat money or critical cleanup site money that exists?
Not at this point in time, John,
Or is it?
unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other question, discussion? Hearing none, I'll call a question. All in favor of this motion signify aye. Raise your hand and speak.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, thank you very much. It is unanimous one more time.
Thank you.
Looking for a volunteer. For read -7 into the.
I'll
I'll
do
read
it.
it. Okay.
This is COM 0224-7. Approval of past grant assurances between the Cape Cod Gateway Airport Commission and the MassDOT Aeronautics Commission. And the motion is to approve the acceptance of the state grant assurances by and between Cape Cod Gateway Airport and the Massachusetts Department of Transportation Aeronautics Division, and to approve authorization of the Airport Commission Chair to execute said grant assurances on behalf of the Airport Commission. Approval of this motion will approve the assurances for the following 19 projects. And we need a second.
I'll second
Second.
that.
Okay. Prior to existing airport management, the airport had been in conversations with MassDOT Aeronautics and the town of Barnstable's attorney about the grant assurances presented to the airport for various grants. The airport and the town wanted to make sure that changes in the text could be made, and until those changes were accepted, the airport had many outstanding grant assurances. Although the grants were received, the funds spent, and the airport reimbursed for these various projects, several assurances were never signed, but the grants themselves were. MassDOT is asking to correct this oversight and have the grants assurances signed. Because we're still obligated because of signing of the actual receipt of the grant. We're still obligated by these grant assurances, but the insurances themselves were never signed by the town. They were signed by the commission chair, just not by the town. As an enterprise fund, the town was concerned with some of the language used in the insurances and for many, many years did not want to sign them. However, with the help of the airport's attorney, conversations with the town's attorney, and slight modifications that were finally accepted by MassDOT, although they were slight, the revised grant assurances were developed and the town agreed to sign them. The town has also produced a cover letter that they wish to accompany each of these assurances. I provided that to you last week. It's a cover letter that basically identifies that, yes, the airport is responsible as an enterprise fund to meet their obligations for these grants and for these projects moving forward. Airport management is asking for approval of these past grant assurances. The state was able to put these all under one grant assurance, listing all of the projects that you have in front of you on the screen, but they're asking for final approval of these. Any questions or comments?
John,
What's the worth of these grant assurances?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I would have to get back to you. They're for completed projects. I can get you a list after this meeting, John.
Yeah, the reason I ask is that, in the constant chatter we hear about, closing the airport and going back to joint base, there's always the issue of we have to pay back all of these assurances to the state or to the feds, and I'm just curious how much more we're adding to the tab.
Yeah, I can get that for you. I mean, just to
Yeah.
give you an example, that VMP, that #1 phase 2, that was about $300,000 project. But I'll have to get the rest for you. So
I mean,
I'll
no,
work.
it's for the good of the entire committee in the sense that we know ultimately, as we discuss the chatter, for lack of a better word, about doing any kinds of studies between Gateway and Joint Base, what this really means in terms of monies.
Yeah. Some of these projects
That's
are
all.
included in that original $89 million amount that we
They
discussed
are, okay.
earlier. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
okay. That's a long list. And, oh,
I think-
that's
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mark.
So just to be clear, this money we've already spent it, right? We've already accepted the money and we've already spent it.
That's
That is
correct.
So
These are
the
completed
money's already
projects.
it's already on our tab. It doesn't matter whether or not
Correct.
we approve and sign these. It's already on our tab.
That is
My
correct.
question is, these were not signed because of an oversight. Is that correct?
No, these were not signed because the town had some difficulty with the language that was used in the grant assurances. And they were trying to have the state make modifications. And it basically came down to, if you want the grant, these are our assurances.
For 9 years?
For many years, the former airport manager was dealing with this, trying to get them modified, and it just they never closed the loop on it.
Okay. I guess that's what I'm trying to get to, is that the loop was never closed. And I
And
just
it
want to
is-
make sure that we have fixed the process issues so that we won't end up 9 years down the road with another 19 project. But we
Yeah,
have to deal
no, we have fixed the process. We had our most recent grant assurances for our most recent projects, such as runway 624 rehabilitation and the EMAS bed. Those projects were all signed by the town manager and by the airport commission chair with the new grant assurances that we have in place, and this cover letter that the town wanted to add to all those grant assurances. So those have already been completed.
Okay, thank
What
you.
was the language change?
They wanted to make some modifications to the grants in terms of the backstop. I'm paraphrasing here. The backstop for the airport, if for some reason an enterprise fund does not have the ability to pay back the grant funds, the backstop is the sponsor, which is the town of Barnstable. That's not going to change. The sponsor is the town of Barnstable. We are a department of the town of Barnstable. And that was the language that they were trying to have change, because they felt that the language identified that taxpayers in the town would be required to pay back this grant if the airport's enterprise fund couldn't. And that is true. They are the backstop. It is the
Right.
town of Barnstable is the sponsor.
They have the deep pockets.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, John. Any other questions or comments regarding this laundry list here? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor signify aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all very much. Get that one finally cleaned up. Thanks,
Yes,
Katie.
thank you.
and the town and state, whoever. Wendy, would you read the next one, please? -8, the motion. Do you have it in
Sure.
front of?
Yes, I do.
Ah,
Can you hear me?
yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Com 0224-8, approval of amendment number 8 to the contract dated August 18th, 2020, by and between Cape Cod Gateway Airport and Horsley Witten Group for on-call environmental engineering, permitting, and DEP remediation consultant services. The motion is to approve amendment number 8 to the contract. Okay, the exact same thing, in the amount of $65,000 for fiscal year 2024. It's sponsored by the Finance Subcommittee and may be acted upon.
May I have a second, please?
Seconded.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie?
Horsley Witten Group is the airport's on-call engineering firm and for environmental engineering, permitting, and for DEP remediation services. They're a licensed site professionals. They have been the airport's consultant on record and licensed site professionals for a number of years. The airport extended their contract to coincide with the fiscal year rather than end mid-year during the fiscal cycle. But at that time, when we extended the contract, we failed to identify the amount of funds available in the fiscal year, which is $65,000 available in the airport's budget to cover on-call services such as environmental engineering. So at the time, let me just pull up my amendment. So at the time of amendment number 7, we said no monetary change, meaning that we're not changing their contract amount, but what we failed to do is identify the $65,000 for locally funded CIP projects, which is already identified in our budget, and it is identified in their contract as that dollar amount. So the amendment would rectify that, make sure that we have those funds available to cover any projects that come up for Horsley Witten Group, whether it's in response to an emergency response for the airport or some other task that we have them do that falls within their typical remediation or environmental permitting and engineering services. Any comments or questions on this?
Mark?
Yes, sir. So Katie, the contract was changed to align to fiscal year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's what created the gap in the funding?
There wasn't necessarily a gap in the funding. The gap was really the time frame. We wanted to end on the fiscal year. It just makes it easier for us to have our on-calls that do coincide with the fiscal year, because we identify the dollar amount within their contract per fiscal year, not necessarily aligning with their contract dates. So we had identified 65,000 in fiscal year 2024 to cover in my environmental services.
Okay, so there are two changes that are being implemented with the contract. One is to align it to the fiscal year, and the other is to fund the projects in fiscal 24. Is that correct?
So amendment number 7 already aligned it for the fiscal year. So this item for today's agenda is for the 65,000 for the local CIP funds.
Okay, so the issue about aligning it to the fiscal year has nothing to do with Amendment 8.
No.
Okay, all right. So this is, bottom line is for Amendment 8, it's 65,000 to fund the issues for fiscal 24.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? John?
No, I'm good.
All clear? Anybody else? All
By me.
right, call a question. All in favor signify aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Once again, thank you. That's unanimous. Report of special committees. There are none because Chris is not with us today from Yarmouth and the noise is out of date. So we get into updates. And Katie, zip these if you can.
Yep, I can. It's up to the commission, the financial review. I can just provide that to you in an email. You can take a look at it. It's up to you. I see a yes from Mark.
Fine by me.
Okay, sounds good.
That works.
Strategic planning for the subcommittee, Mark, Geo, and Norm Weil are trying to work on a date when we can meet for that strategic plan. So we're working on that. The airport environment, Mark, do you have anything to add to that? Okay. Airport environmental assessment, we had the comment period, we extended it for 1 month, so it was open for a total of 2 months. From December, January, and February 9th was the closing of the comment timeframe. We had 15 comments during that time frame that were received. I can send those to you. They're available online as well on the MIPA website, but I can send those to you so you can take a look at those right after this meeting. I can do that. Upcoming events. The first event is coming up March 22nd and 23rd, which is a night in the terminal. We are hosting a scout troop from Sandwich. 25 scouts will be here on the airport. I know Norm Weil has already agreed to volunteer. I'll be asking for other volunteers for that event as well, but we're planning for that. And then the other events that we're gearing up for are already in progress and planning is underway. That's all I have for updates, unless you want to hear anything about the projects that we're working on. Otherwise, I think we're good.
Everybody clear? John, go ahead.
Just a quick question on the April 30th, May 1st Cape Cod Blue Economy Foundation.
Yes,
What are we doing with that? Is that in partnership with the chamber?
that's a partnership with the chamber. The chamber is running that event. They have partnered with the Loft Aviation. They're using their hangar for the event, but day one is all going to be central around electric aviation. So Mastar Aeronautics will be here speaking about electric aviation. Beta from Vermont will be here, as well as others covering electric aviation. Day two is going to be more about marine environment and not really associated with the airport, but I would love for the commission to be on present for April 30th.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Is that it, Katie?
That's it.
Wow. Commissioners' comments. Anybody like to make, go ahead, John.
Just a quick question. Any update on the landing mall? Can we ask who's the developer? I'm blanking.
WS.
WS Development.
WS. Can they put out a press release on what's happening? People question me, what's going on besides floor decor, and most people don't even know there's a Whole Foods going down on the other end. And everybody
Yeah.
drives by now and sees a lot of construction.
I will chat with them, and I'll also see if they want to come to the next commission meeting in March and give
Yeah,
an
I should
update.
update. I think that's good.
Yep, I can certainly do that. I'll ask them that, John.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay, I sent out a couple of bulletins to you, and I know it's geographically undesirable, but Norm, you've got a lot of pilot friends and everybody else. There's two functions that the Aero Club of New England is putting on. One is their icebreaker, which has got a very interesting speaker. But the big one is the one we call Crash Course, which is a huge safety, aviation safety seminar, lots of analysis. And this year, really, really top level, the president, I haven't got it in front of me, but the president of AOPA, and they're honoring the past, the loss of Bruce McSpadden. And we got another guy who was, I don't have it in front of me, but he's the former vice chair of the National Transportation Safety Board. This is a big event. It attracts really quite a large, like a couple of 300 people or more. And but for any pilots, these are, well, I know it's geographically undesirable from the Cape, but these are absolutely superb programs. Looking ahead, next meeting, it'll be just about spring. We'll be in daylight savings time. And any final comments from anybody? If not, I'll seek an motion to adjournment.
So moved.
For a second. All in favor, signify aye.
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 No opposition. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care all.